The years you think you wasted, and why they weren't. There is a particular kind of pain that has no obvious name. It isn't grief, exactly. It isn't regret in the simple sense. It is something more layered, the feeling that arrives on an ordinary evening when you look back at a stretch of your life and think, what did I do with all of that time? Years spent on a path that led nowhere. A relationship that ended in ways you didn't choose. A version of yourself you inhabited for so long that you forgot there might be other versions. Seasons of emptiness, of spiritual disconnection, of going through motions without knowing why. We have a word for this experience. We call those years wasted. But what if that word, waste, is itself the distortion? What the locusts actually were? The ancient text of Joel contains a promise that has outlasted centuries of human suffering. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. The context matters. The people of Israel had experienced a catastrophic locust plague. Crops destroyed, livelihoods gone, the landscape of their lives stripped bare by forces they could not stop. And what was promised in response was not simply agricultural recovery. It was something far more comprehensive. The promise was restoration. Not just of what was lost, but of the people themselves. Psychologically, this image of the locust is worth sitting with. Because locusts don't arrive as a single catastrophic event. They come in swarms, over time, stripping things away gradually, until one day you look at the field of your life and notice how bare it has become. Depression works like this. Trauma works like this. Abusive relationships work like this. So does the slow drift of living according to other people's expectations rather than your own truth. The eating happens quietly, incrementally, and you often don't see the extent of the damage until you're standing in what remains. The psychology of feeling behind. Carl Jung observed something important about the human relationship with time. We do not suffer from the past itself. We suffer from our story about the past. From the meaning we assign to what happened, and more specifically, from the judgment we attach to where we currently stand relative to where we believed we should be. That gap, between the life you have lived and the life you imagined you'd be living by now, is the psychological wound that the locust metaphor addresses. Most people are carrying this wound quietly. The person who spent their 20s in an addiction and is now rebuilding at 40. The woman who poured a decade into a marriage that ended in betrayal. The man who followed a career path chosen by fear rather than calling, and is now somewhere in his 50s wondering who he would have been otherwise. The internalized verdict in each case is the same. I wasted it. I am behind. I have less to work with than other people because of what I lost. And this verdict, while understandable, is psychologically devastating. Because it operates as a fixed belief, and fixed beliefs shape the landscape of what we think is possible. Pain with a function. Romans 8 verse 28 contains one of the most psychologically rich observations in all of Scripture. In all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Notice the specificity of all things. Not some things. Not the pleasant things. Not the things that made sense at the time. All things, including the failures, the dead ends, the years that looked, from the outside, like nothing was happening. Modern psychology has arrived at a parallel understanding through a completely different route. Post-traumatic growth, the well-documented phenomenon in which people emerge from significant suffering with expanded capacity, deeper compassion, and a clarity of values they could not have developed any other way, tells us something important. Pain is not merely something to survive. It is often, in ways we cannot perceive while we're inside it, something that builds. The person who spent years struggling with addiction develops a depth of self-understanding that is genuinely rare. The woman who endured a difficult marriage and rebuilt her life alone carries a self-reliance and an emotional intelligence that her easier path would not have created. The man who failed publicly and was forced to start over often finds, in that second chapter, a freedom and authenticity that the first chapter never contained. None of this makes the suffering worthwhile in a simple sense. The cost was real. The losses were real. But the transformation that suffering makes possible is also real, and it is not available through any other door. The neuroscience of restoration. Psalm 51 contains a prayer that resonates far beyond its religious context. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. What this prayer is actually describing, in psychological terms, is the restoration of the nervous system's capacity for positive experience after it has been conditioned by prolonged stress or trauma. When we spend extended time in survival mode, whether through grief, abuse, anxiety, or simply the grinding depletion of circumstances that don't change, our nervous system adapts. It becomes oriented toward threat detection. It becomes harder to access states of genuine pleasure, curiosity, or hope. The brain quite literally reorganizes itself around vigilance. This is not weakness. It is an intelligent biological response to a difficult environment. But it means that restoration, genuine, lasting restoration, is not simply a matter of circumstances improving. It requires the nervous system to learn, slowly, that safety is real, that good things can be trusted, that the future is not simply more of what the past contained. This is a neurological process, and it takes time, which is why the promise of restored joy is not instantaneous. It arrives gradually, in small moments that accumulate, a morning where the light feels different, a conversation where you laugh without remembering why you shouldn't, a day where the weight lifts just enough that you can see the horizon again. These are not small things. They are evidence of a system healing. New things in wilderness places. Isaiah 43 verse 19 contains a line that has always struck me as psychologically precise. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Do you not perceive it? That question carries an implication worth examining. The new thing is already present. The way through the wilderness is already being formed. The stream in the wasteland is already moving underground. The question is whether you can perceive it, whether your attention, still turned backward toward loss, can shift enough to notice what is emerging. This is one of the central challenges of psychological recovery. The mind that has been organized around loss and threat tends to filter reality in ways that confirm its existing expectations. It becomes structurally difficult to notice possibility when the cognitive lens is calibrated for danger. This is not pessimism or weakness. It is the natural consequence of how the brain learns. But it means that restoration often involves a deliberate reorientation of attention, learning to look for what is growing rather than fixating exclusively on what was destroyed. The wilderness does not disappear overnight, but something can begin to move through it. The wholeness that comes. The restoration described in Joel is explicitly comprehensive. It is not partial recovery, a few crops replaced, some losses compensated. It is complete renewal that touches every dimension of what was damaged. Psychologically, this reflects something important about the nature of healing. We tend, when we are suffering, to compartmentalize. We address the surface symptoms while avoiding the underlying wound. We manage the external circumstances while leaving the internal landscape unchanged. And so the healing is partial, fragile, dependent on conditions remaining stable. Real restoration is different. It is the kind that heals the wound rather than just covering it. That addresses not just what happened but what the experience of what happened has done to the structure of how we see ourselves and the world. This level of healing touches how you relate to your own emotions, whether you can feel them fully or whether they still feel dangerous. It touches how you move in relationships, whether you approach them from scarcity and fear or from genuine abundance. It touches the quality of your inner life, whether silence feels threatening or nourishing, whether being alone feels like punishment or like freedom. It touches, in short, everything that the locusts actually ate. The question of timing. One of the most psychologically significant aspects of restoration is that it does not operate on our preferred schedule. We want it immediately. We want the wasted years returned to us now, quickly, in a way that makes the math work out fairly. We want to feel better before we've fully processed what made us feel bad. But healing, genuine healing, has its own timing. And that timing is often frustrating precisely because it is doing something we cannot fully observe. The waiting period is not dead time. Research on grief, trauma recovery, and psychological development consistently shows that the integration phase, the period when nothing seems to be changing, is often when the most important internal work is happening. Neural pathways are being rewired. Old beliefs are being slowly examined and released. New capacities are forming underground, like roots before the plant is visible. The faith required in this period is the faith not in a specific outcome, but in the process itself. The trust that what feels like stagnation is actually preparation. Jung called this the tension of the opposites, the uncomfortable period of holding two contradictory experiences simultaneously. The pain of what was lost and the emerging sense that something new is possible. This tension is not a problem to be resolved quickly. It is the crucible in which transformation actually occurs. What becomes of the wasted years? When restoration comes, and it does come, in ways that are rarely exactly what we imagined, it brings with it something that could not have arrived any other way. A testimony, not in the performative sense, but in the genuine sense of having been through something and having found, on the other side of it, something real. A self that is less afraid because it has survived what it feared. A capacity for compassion toward others that is rooted in actual experience rather than abstraction. A clarity about what matters because you have lived through the loss of things that don't. Psalm 30 captures this transformation with extraordinary economy. You turned my wailing into dancing, you removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. The wailing was real. The sackcloth was real. The loss that produced them was real. But the dancing was also real. And the joy was not the joy of someone who never knew sorrow. It was the joy of someone who knew sorrow deeply, and was restored. A prayer for those who are still waiting. For everyone reading this who is somewhere in the middle of the process, not yet through it, not yet able to see what's on the other side. May the years that feel wasted begin to reveal their hidden meaning. May the pain that still lives in your body find the safety it needs to release. May your nervous system learn, slowly and surely, that good things can be trusted. May the wilderness you're walking through begin to show you the way that was always being formed within it. May the joy that was taken from you, by loss, by circumstance, by your own choices, by things entirely outside your control, be restored in ways you cannot yet imagine. And may you come to understand, not as a theological abstraction but as a lived experience, that none of it, not 1 year, not 1 moment, was actually wasted in the hands of a God who redeems all things. Amen. The best is not behind you. It never was. With God, the best, the truest, the deepest, the most whole, is always still ahead.